I was born in Parliament and I've been a farmer since I was 19 years old. When I first started, that's over 35 years ago, it was a lot of rainfall starting from about May straight on to December, January. But now you get rains periodically. Although they say it's the rainy season, I like to joke about it and say, well, it's two dry seasons we have. The hot dry season, and then we have the dry season with a little rain in it, which is from May to December. Because it's really like a dry season, but you get spouts of rain in between. You don't get rain like how we used to get rain. So it's really a difference. It's a mark difference.
Climate change affects a small island developing state like Trinidad and Tobago from every direction. So it's something that we can no longer ignore. The impact of rising sea levels, for example, on coastal habitats, the natural environment, and on the population. A lot of our population development has been near to our ports and so forth. And that will have huge economic impact, which I think is one of the major things that people think about.
We use GDP as a benchmark for success, gross domestic product. I mean, while that's all well and good for certain economic standards, it really does not take into account the true taxation that it's having on environment, on poor communities, on exploitation, on all of those aspects. Before we found oil and natural gas, we were heavily reliant on agriculture, on cocoa, on sugarcane. But as soon as we found this oil and natural gas, which we're so blessed with at the end of the day, we became very, very heavily reliant on that. And as a result, we have actually started to ignore a lot of other valuable industries and resources that we have.
Because of the change in weather, and because farming is such a high-risk area, a business, I wouldn't really encourage my children to get into farming full-time. Farming is a hard job. They don't always work this hard work for that small return. So there's a danger that farming could be lost.
We in Trinidad and Tobago are very wasteful when it comes to energy because we have it at our fingertips and we have it at such a low cost. So we don't see the importance of reducing our usage. When you look at it from a global standpoint, it's not that much that we emit, but in the Caribbean region, we are the highest emitters and we are focused a lot on oil and gas. And because of that, the dependence that we have on oil and gas will only lead to more and more emissions.
We wanted to have a platform for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago to actually come forward and talk about their experiences related to climate change. IAMovement is a not-for-profit NGO. It was created by a group of young, passionate people in Trinidad and Tobago who really wanted to create positive social change. So in 2014, we hosted the first ever People's Climate March in Trinidad, really to bring awareness and light to the need for the conversation of climate change. There was a global march happening in tandem in New York City, and everyone else around the world in big cities were having this march. And it was the first ever sort of really large environmental movement specifically related to climate change. We decided we wanted to be part of it. So it was really important to actually have discussions centered around these international events, really to bring the conversation not only to locals but also to our government leaders who were attending some of these events, to show that Trinidad and Tobago are serious about climate change issues and of course how it impacts all of us.
Why is the economy based on the degradation of our planet? What we as humans think progress is, we can continue that, but it can be in a sustainable way. At the end of the day, yes, we're humans, but we're also consumers. And what we choose to consume or where we choose to consume our things from all ties back into if a corporation has ethical behavior or not. We have to challenge that. We have to say, no, this is unacceptable. And you don't have to go out on the street and protest it like no tomorrow. You can actually just stop purchasing from them. It's really simple. You have the 3 Ps, which are people, planet, and profit. If you have one that is significantly outweighing the other, that's not a balanced society. And somebody or something is going to be at a deficit at the end of the day. And from what right now we're seeing, it's the planet and the people.
We are where South America meets the Caribbean. Very, very, very unique situation. We have the wealth of the continent. We have the oil, the natural gas. We have the diversity of the northern range, and people come from all over to observe, this biodiversity that we have here. And then you can literally hop on a flight to Tobago. The beauty of the Caribbean, white sand beaches, turquoise waters. We really are blessed.
So in Trinidad and Tobago, renewable energy has been something that has been on the table for a long time. The issue with that is that there hasn't been legislation in place that would really aid in renewable energy or using renewable energy. And the reason for this is because the laws are just very old. If we wanted to use renewables, we need to change legislation.
We have to include the state because our existing systems are all intertwined with the state-owned enterprises.
In a world now where there's a lot of talk of climate change and fossil fuels, people, I think, have really come to see renewable energies as almost like a competitor. Fossil fuels has been here in Trinidad and Tobago for a long time, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Here in Trinidad, most people, or a lot of people, make their livelihood off of fossil fuels, and the nation itself thrives on fossil fuels. Subconsciously, it makes people almost think that renewable energies is a threat. So the fact that we could really look at the possibility of tapping into renewable energies, wind and solar, it doesn't mean that fossil fuels has to go. Fossil fuels is going to stay here as long as it has to. But the fact is, if it's going to have to start phasing out eventually, because it could be simply because of market prices, If renewables are getting more and more competitive internationally, we can't really foresee the cost of fossil fuels going up in the near future.
I've been in the electrical business for decades, and back in the 90s, I was thinking about what's the next wave of energy-saving products. I was thinking about solar power and what we can do, and I started looking around for solar PV suppliers. And then somewhere around 2000, I started to think about manufacturing and the whole value chain of a solar PV panel, and asking what would it take to manufacture these in Trinidad. And that's how I got it. That's how I really got into it. It's quite by accident, actually. Our vision is that in the next 3 decades, Trinidad and Tobago could be to renewable energy what we are now to petrochem. We're a major player in the energy sector. We can be a major player in renewable energy.
There's so many things that we are undercapitalizing on, and we have become so heavily reliant on fossil fuels, and it's affecting us because it's caused a bit of a handout culture. We're facing this problem because we are so heavily tied to this almighty oil dollar.
The whole world is dealing with this problem. It's not just Trinidad. All we really have to do is raise our hand and say we're willing and ready to listen and to collaborate. It's a harmonious relationship between renewables and oil and gas. If we are allowed to invest in renewables and realize the potential of renewables in the economy, it gives us more of our other natural resources to monetize and create economic benefits from. People are, in some regards, hesitant about renewable energy, but I think it's because we haven't figured out how do we actually make them work together.
This really is a matter of energy security for our future. We have confirmed something like 10 to 15 years of accessible fossil fuels left that we can get right now based on current extraction rates and economic capability. If fossil fuel prices don't go back up anytime soon and they don't go back up in the near future, it could just be that we literally have 10 to 15 years of resources left. And if that's the case, what's going to happen when that runs out? Looking at renewable energy is not just a matter of environment, it's a matter of risk for our economy. In 2013 and 2014, the annual energy fuel subsidy was at $1.1 billion and $900 million respectively. We are spending annually so we can just run around on cheap energy. The cost of renewable energies is on average about $2 million per megawatt for these large projects. I found that the energy consumption of Tobago is about 80 megawatts. Taking that and the cost of renewable energy is at about $2 million per megawatt. That would mean that you could make Tobago 100% renewable for under $200 million. Now, if we take that and we look at our annual energy subsidy, 200 million represents 1/5 of what we are spending every year, could really make Tobago 100% renewable. But of course, it's interesting to look at Trinidad and Tobago together as a whole. The annual energy subsidy that we have of this $1 billion could actually make Trinidad and Tobago 25% renewable. That means in just 4 years of what we have been spending annually, could actually make Trinidad and Tobago 100% renewable.
We relied so much on fossil fuels that it's affected diversification and it's affected going into alternative energy. And I have been in the extraordinary situation many years ago where I was at a CARICOM meeting in which Trinidad and Tobago was reluctant to vote in favor of alternative energy because it said it goes against the main product they sell. We try to sell people fossil fuels. Why would we promote something that is going to undo our business, like alternative energy? In Barbados, they have a feed-in tariff policy that allows people who generate electricity from renewable sources to feed it into the grid. And instead of getting a bill at the end of the month, they get a check. One of the problems in Trinidad and Tobago has been a reluctance to go on renewable energy because our scale of energy use is so enormous. So we could save a lot of energy simply by being more efficient. We should be the first ones to be completely off the grid because we have opportunity to make the material and to sell it to other people as well. You'll make money from doing something that is in the interest of, reducing the climate change effect. Okay? So it's a no-brainer, a no-regret policy. You have nothing to lose. You're actually going to make money off of going in this direction. So what really is the issue?
Most of the world now has reached grid parity, where the cost of generating power using solar or wind is equivalent to purchasing power off the grid or generating and distributing power using traditional fossil fuels. If we were to develop even the first phase of the entire value chain, this can contribute significantly to our GDP. We're talking about 2 to 3% of our GDP, employing over 8,000 people, high-paying jobs directly into this industry. We're talking about $800 million in exports per annum, which is 2/3 of our current non-energy exports. So you're talking about a 60% growth in potential export earnings from our non-energy sector. So it's a significant contributor to what we're currently doing in terms of foreign exchange, or it can be. Trinidad is in a very, very unique position. We're sitting in a little enclave with substantive resources around us in terms of natural gas and energy potential. And we see the ability to leverage that to be a major producer of PV panels that we can supply throughout the region, not just in the Caribbean, but throughout the hemisphere, and change completely some of the economics of our Caribbean neighbors. Some countries use 10% of their GDP for power generation, and that's significant. With renewable energy, they can seriously reduce that and move towards energy independence.
We are a hotbed for renewables. In terms of sunlight, when we can monetize it, we can create economic benefits from renewable energy.
Trinidad has had a lot of money for a long time. Yes, things are changing now, but that is why we have to think smart now. We will continue to extract fossil fuels as long as we can. That is something that is, not in a massive way up for debate. But we should really be looking at how can we reinvest into renewables now while we have the chance, while we have the resources to.
Our future is dependent on what we do now. Not just young people need to come together, but the small island states need to come together to form a similar mindset, because we can't have division among ourselves if we are to see any sort of progress.
Policymakers and people in general have to treat the environment with a lot more love, right? We talking right here, and people leaving plastic bottles all over the place. They burning the labas. How much time for the year the labas burn? Why is the labas where it is? Why it is they don't have some kind of recyclable program going on, teaching children from young, preschool, primary school, how to recycle, how to reuse stuff, you know. A lot of this fast-paced world is use and throw away, use and throw away, use and discard. You don't need that. Policymakers should have some program in place to teach people how to reuse stuff, how to recycle stuff, right? We don't have it.
What happens when you pressurize a bubble too much? It pops. We are pressurizing our bubble, and it's not necessarily going to pop just because of the nature of it, but the biosphere is changing, and when that changes, that affects us. We've jumped on this bandwagon of infinite economic growth on a finite planet, and it's completely not sustainable. The fact of the matter is, if we put half as much effort as we do into these things as we do into extracting oil from the deepest, darkest oceans, we would be miles and miles and miles and miles ahead of where we are right now.
We have access to raw materials, we have access to energy, we have access to sunlight, and we have neighbors that are at over 30 cents per kilowatt hour for power generation. So we have all of this in a very small geographic location, and gives us a unique advantage to compete with some of the major producers in the world. Trinidad and Tobago could be in the top quarter percentile in terms of competitiveness. We can build the economies, we can create economic spaces, and we could be a major player in the renewable energy space.
For the first time ever, 195 countries came together and agreed collectively in consensus that fossil fuels is having a destructive impact on the environment, the climate, and the world, and that the movement towards renewable energies is inevitable. If you look at other countries that don't have these massive amount of fossil fuels, they look at the environment as a vital resource for their country's livelihood. Be it through tourism, be it living off of the land, the state of the environment directly impacts their livelihoods. So in Trinidad and Tobago, where we haven't had to think about environment as actually contributing to our livelihood for so long, we have really let it fall to the wayside. But the fact is, if we can start to recognize that our environment is tied hand in hand to sort of like the quality of life and the social and economic benefits of the country as well, we would recognize that it's not just our environment that we are talking about, it's not just our environment that we are fighting for.
Climate change is going to hit us hardest and hit us first. We can't run from it. We have this tiny island and we have nowhere else to go.
We're so content with our everyday life, you know, and we don't feel like any one person, we are significant enough to make a difference.
We need to work together and see the power within ourselves and the power that we can create together.
We have to throw away that whole yellow and red divide, you know, this political divide, and, you know, we need to unite. You know, we need to bring the youth in. Right now, it's the youth that are going to make the difference. We need to educate them, we need to support them, we need to support their ideas. It's very hard to reach people in power to understand these things, but, you know, it's worth a shot at the end of the day. We only have one planet. You know, where else are we going to go after this?